All right, we're recording.
Hi, great. Show us Tartaria again, Ashley, and tell us a bit about her.
It's my friend Snake.
Oh,
She's
gee,
really she's
bless
really
it.
precious. Yeah, I really appreciate her.
And do you feel that you can sort of, does she respond, relate to you somehow? And
Yeah, she does. The last time I visited my friend, I spent like 3 hours just hanging out with her and just really being present. What I really love about snakes is, when you really just be with them, I think any animal, they just really help you to come deep into presence and to just move and work with her. And she's very curious, right? She's very curious.
and is she a dangerous snake?
Nope, nope,
No.
she's sweet as can be.
But I
She's,
mean, if she responded violently, like, to danger, would she be able to poison anyone, bite them,
no,
and
no, she
no?
does have teeth, but she doesn't bite unless she was like threatened really. She's still like working with getting used to humans. And I've been like, that's when I sit with her for a couple hours. Like a lot of times, like last time, she just crawled up my sweater and like wrapped around my whole arm, and she just hung out there for like 2 hours.
Wow.
And
I
what
tell
the,
you what, that's better than a gun for
yeah,
protection.
right.
I mean, it's quite startling. But
What I love about snakes is like when you really get to know them, you can attune to their frequency, and their frequency is so much with the earth and so grounded. So they're good medicine. I'm gonna get my own snake. I like to come visit my friends so I can play with the snake. No, my
does
friends.
Tartaria have any friends, or is she on her own in the snake species with no friends?
Um, yeah, she's just chilling here by herself.
Yeah,
She
yeah,
she seems to be doing okay.
yeah.
So it's beautiful to connect with you and meet you. I'm so
Oh, well,
grateful
it's good
to be
to
here.
connect with you. I watch your videos, check your Facebook page, and I wanted to explore you a little bit more.
Yeah.
At this time, we're in a very amazing time, and we're well, we've talked about the patriarchy a little bit, you and I, and the Women's Council talks about it a fair bit. But uh, um, we're at a time where we're changing everything, and I think that's got a lot to do with the way women are coming into society. Do you feel that way? Um, but before I go to that, I noticed in the patriarchy they introduce people a lot through credentials, like what degrees they've got and what they've done and achievements, and not so much through wisdom. And so I noticed, just to introduce people who are listening about you, I think your interests cover things like 5G, herbal protocols. I've heard you talk about MK Ultra, the balance between masculine and feminine, the new age that is dawning. And I think people would probably want to know if there's other areas, and I'd certainly want to know if there's other areas that I've left out, perhaps that you have spent a lot of time thinking about.
Yeah, that's a great question. Thank you. Um, well, my background is as a counselor. I went to school for it, and as well as political science, I studied politics, political theory very deeply, nationalism specifically. And I feel like that's a reflection, like what I've done in the outside world of degrees and credentials. Like it's just a reflection of, my insatiable desire for truth and for understanding and to understand how human beings and life work. Um, I've done a lot of work with the food system, with sustainable food systems and agriculture. That was a big part of my path, working for an international organization. But again, it's always been about supporting moving back into balance.
Mm.
And I think that's been my path individually, is how do I stay balanced?
And
Right,
you're talking
Snakey?
about your inner self, the balance of your own self in relation to what's going on around you and with other people. Is that what you mean?
Yeah, yeah. Cultivating balance in self, cultivating what it really means to be in relation. What does it mean to be in relation with life? So you want to touch on the patriarchy, right? I don't see the patriarchy as just a man thing. I think it's like a program. It's a psychological program that impacts women and men, you know? And I feel like what we've seen with that dominating program is such a complete imbalance with how we relate to life. And it's a power over rather
Mm.
than a sharing power and, being in right relation with not only ourselves, but with each other and with the natural world and the cosmos.
Yeah,
Um,
we don't know how to do that, do we? I mean, we have never learned. We haven't sort of got a manual for how we should think. And I mean, the Bible was something that gave a spiritual blueprint, if you like, but that was only written by men, and that's what I mean. Like, and I think that yes, and I'd love to explore your side of your thinking about this program. I think that's true, but I think the programming comes to us from none other than our own, human. And it's just if all women wrote something, it would be distorted. So if all men write something, it's distorted. So what we need, and I think you talk a lot about it, Ashley, about equality now. And can we build a system like this together and leave all our past behind?
that's a really good question. It's a big question. What does it really mean to leave our past behind? Is that possible? And I think that what we're looking at on a world stage is a collective expression of rage and grief. And I feel that in order to even leave the past behind, we have to be able to grieve what has occurred. So we don't bypass the wisdom. There's something that we must extract from the trauma, from the control, from these controlling based systems, in order to even move forward. And I want to, if I can, I would like to share a quick
Oh, please
example.
do. I'm curious to see. I think you've touched on something so important right now. Yeah,
Um,
please do share it.
I might have to change, like the lighting is switching in here. So many years ago, my son was going to a Waldorf school. And at that time, I was working as a school counselor at a public school. This was in Vermont. But I had my son in a private school. And I was observing concerning behavior with his teacher. And I observed it and I was just watching. And then eventually I was like, no, something needs to be spoken. So I talked to him and I talked to the administration about how I saw that he was physically feeling aggressive with the children. And so I said, I'm very concerned and something needs to change, or I'm going to go to the authorities about this and I'm going to bring it to a higher level. Um, and so what they set up was once a week, I would meet with one of the administrators as well as my son's teacher, and we would talk and try to mediate and see. And he was honest and says, yeah, I've been going through some anger issues and I need greater support. I'm having a hard time managing the classroom and so on and so forth. And for me, I'm like, okay, well, this guy is aware, he's taking responsibility, and he's open to receiving guidance and mentorship, and he's being held accountable. And then one day I came to pick up my son from school in an after school program, and his friend ran up to me and said, Mr. Blow, I'm not going to say his name publicly, but Mr. So and so
Mm-hmm.
kicked a desk at me today. And that was the last straw. I was done. Okay. I
Mm-hmm.
had been very patient, but we're talking about fourth graders here and children. So I contacted the school. This was right before Christmas break. They blew me off and I said, we're not doing this. So I wrote an email to every single parent in the classroom telling them what this child told me, which my son and 2 other kids confirmed.
Mm-hmm.
The school tried to ostracize me and say that I was going against school policy and I wasn't allowed to reach out and tell the parents that. And I said, no, under the Constitution, I have freedom of speech and we're not going to play these games. So over the break, the Christmas break, we know that they let him go. They fired him, but they made up a story saying, oh, he left to take another job. And so before they were bringing, like they hired a teacher, temporary teacher, and they had us come in for a class meeting, all the parents. And so we go in, we sit down, it's my partner and I, and they're like, so here's the new teacher, and this is what we're doing, and blah, 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 blah. And I stopped them because you could see the bewilderment on the parents' face. Like, what happened? What happened to the old teacher?
Yeah.
And I said, we need to discuss what just happened. We need to discuss there was a violation, there was an abuse, that somebody was hurt here. And without mediation, without talking about it, openly, we're not going to be able to really truly move forward and rebuild trust. And they tried to silence me again. So the reason why I share this story is that from those micro situations all the way to macro, say we're having a complete societal shift, there is this process of grief, of acknowledging what has happened, the atrocities. Now, this has been happening over these past years as we've seen things, more tension on the world stage, more people standing up, whether it's between race relations, class relations, and things like that. But we're not yet in the resolution mode, in the conflict resolution. We're still in the blame game mode.
Mm-hmm.
And we're still in that, and it's valid. I feel
Mm-hmm.
victimized mode because
Mm-hmm.
people still feel very victimized and oppressed. And so I really do feel like there has to be some type of initiatives that provides that bridge that's going to enable us to get to the other side, whatever that looks like.
Mm-hmm.
Basically moving back into balance and harmony with all our relations.
And just like a wound, we have to heal it, don't we? With grieving is like a healing of the wound. Look at that.
And
Hello,
the snake,
Tartaria.
the snake, I thought she would be such a good addition to this because
Oh,
she
look at that.
represents healing and transformation, right? And she also, she's the snake shedding the skin. And I feel like that's what's happening on a collective. It can happen on a collective level right now, if we so allow it, is that we can be like the snake shedding the skin of trauma.
Yeah.
And that requires us feeling and exploring and learning and growing with each other.
Mm.
Hold on one second. Sorry, I gotta plug my battery in. So yeah, I talk about it a lot. We want to always kind of bypass because it's painful. Because we have to show up and we have to face and feel all of this stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that we do have to purge it. That is such a wise thing to suggest, because it's sort of left out in our society. We never talk about the grieving of one thing. We just go from one thing to another, to another, to another, to another, to another, and we're expected to stay on the same treadmill all the time. And then we see children suffering from it, from
Yes.
aggressive behavior and other things.
Yes.
The teachers can't teach because they're also feeling it, and it just comes out. You can't help it comes out. You can't stuff it down, and we need to be able to express it and have a way of expressing it that doesn't harm.
Yes, yes. I absolutely agree. I had a situation yesterday where I told a guy on Facebook to fuck off. I've never done that before, but it was a hard day. My mom was going into surgery yesterday. I had like several people like messaging me, and it felt very controlling and patriarchal, just telling me like what I need to be doing and I'm not doing things right. And and I just kind of like in that moment, I was just like, fuck off, dude, you
Mm.
know? And I think that the presence of social media is a really incredible tool to talk about these situations,
Yeah.
but a lot of people hide behind a screen and they're using the control language of the patriarchy in very, very, very covert ways, so to speak. And so these dialogues are necessary on all levels, not only in the schools, but on social media. We need to have different ways that we communicate with each other.
Yes. Before you said something about the microcosm and the macrocosm, and I think that I see it as the microcosm is you and microcosm is me, and we ripple outwards from there. But a lot of people start from the perimeters instead of from the center, the source, which is me, you know, and everybody is the source, and they try to do their work on the peripherals in the outside world, sometimes for self-aggrandizement purposes and things like that. And that, because that's valued in our society. Now, the word patriarchy is a very sensitive word. Have you noticed that, Ashley?
Yeah, I when I use that word, I find men in specifically, a lot of men get very defensive, and feel personally attacked. And then I have to explain, this is not just a man thing. This is a psychological program. This is a behavior. This is a set of belief systems. It's an objectification. I've been talking lately a lot about Wilhelm Reich and how he views patriarchy, which is
Yes.
patriarchy is a dominates dominates our sexuality. It's all based in control. So yeah, it seems to be a very sensitive word for a lot of people, but it also lets you know the level of where they're at in owning the patriarch within them.
Yes, yes, exactly. And I think that it must be women to bring this out, because uh, I think men have got blind spots about it. They cannot see it, whereas you can talk to every woman. For example, I was somebody I know. They've got a good marriage, but every time the woman goes to say something, he butts in. He's a very good guy. He's a very aware guy, but he doesn't know he's doing this. And she kind of just rolls her eyes and goes, "Oh, you know, he just does this." And she tells me later that, you know, he does it because I just give in because it's just easier. And I've noticed myself doing this, and I've noticed other women doing this, and I've noticed also men doing it, because I think the patriarchy, a good description of the patriarchy might be toxic masculine. So it's not a healthy masculine, but it is masculine. And I wish that the males would look at other males and say, "Hey, guy, you know, like, that's not on. You shouldn't treat a woman like that, or don't talk to a kid like that, or, you know, that's violence, or whatever they see going on, like in a fight." But it's kind of still okay to be violent, especially when we're sending our troops to war.
Yeah.
I don't know where you want to go with that, but there's a lot
Um,
there.
there's a lot there. There is, and this is the work that I do every day. You know, for me, for a while, I was working at a domestic violence counseling center. Wasn't just domestic violence, but primarily that's what I was doing. I was a domestic violence counselor. And so I was working with men and women, and I'd work with women who were victims of domestic violence as well as men who were perpetrators of it. Um, and it's hard. Like, I don't know if I want to say that the patriarchy, like, if we look at it historically, we can say that patriarchy is toxic masculinity, okay? That we've looked at control systems that have been dominated by the gender male, right?
Yeah.
Okay. because I've wanted to move away from shame, because I know that it's not going to be shame that's going to heal. And that all the so many hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of men that I've worked with who are perpetuating abuse cycles, who were playing that role of patriarch, they were abused by the
Yeah.
patriarchy. Okay. Very rare that I got a true psychopath who was just born quote unquote evil. No, these people were abused severely and groomed and programmed. And a lot of the times when I'd work with these guys and I'd be like, you know, they would almost be like, what do you mean that I can't monitor my girlfriend's whereabouts? And so, but that was a genuine thing. It was so indoctrinated and embedded within them.
Mm-hmm.
And that really just became their worldview, that became normalized. And so what I talk about a lot is that abuse, psychopathy, patriarchy has been so normalized. If something is so normalized, most people aren't going to see it.
Right.
Now, fortunately, that has been changing. And it's been a kind of messy with women's liberation, with the women's movement. It's been messy. I don't think it's been 100% healthy whatsoever. I
Yeah.
don't adhere or follow. I don't identify myself as a feminist. You know,
No,
I
me neither.
identify myself as, I don't even want to identify myself. I just love life and I want to see all people free. But I have a special love in my heart for women and children, probably because I've been through abuse.
Mm-hmm.
Probably because I was abused as a child, probably because I was raped, I was molested. You know, I've been hit, I've been
I'm
hurt.
sorry.
And
Yeah.
so,
Wow.
you know, I have a lot of, you know, I saw the effects it took on my son specifically,
Yeah.
you know, of me being in an abusive relationship and being hit right in front of him. So,
Yeah.
um, I like to see patriarchy. It is like it is a program, and it
Yeah.
affects men and women. So, and I want to
Yes.
speak to this. Women, especially, like I've noticed, especially a lot of the like baby boomer generation, like
That's
they
my
run,
generation, and you can go for it. I'm probably with you. Yeah.
and a lot of the baby boomers who have broken those paradigms and programs are pretty rare in a lot of ways.
Mm.
Um, but they help to reinforce
Yes.
the patriarchal
Okay.
structure. And I've had the opportunity, and I don't think she's going to watch this, so I'm going to speak truth to it. I really respect confidentiality, but this has been a process. I've been staying with my mom for the past 3 months because of life. My mom is in the hospital right now. She has lung cancer. She just went through surgery. So I stayed out east to support her, as well as other stuff like a pandemic, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so it's like almost like I've been given an opportunity to have a greater, I mean, I haven't lived with my mom since I was in middle school. Okay.
Yeah.
And here I am, I'm 36 years old now, and I've done a lot of work, on myself. And I'm once again faced with the patriarchy in the form of my mother.
Hmm.
And I see how it impacted me so deeply, because it's strong in her. She's loving and I can feel her soul, and I know she loves me. So I'm able to compartmentalize and see see what's the
Mm-hmm.
program,
Mm-hmm.
and see what's her true soul. So I don't
Mm-hmm.
take it too personally. But yet at the same time, I've still been like working through the wounding. And I think that's really important to talk about, is how women help to contribute and reinforce the patriarchal
Mm-hmm.
structures, for sure.
That's an
And
incredible point.
you need both genders to keep it going. And
Yes.
so what we have seen a domination, an exploitation, an objectification of women for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years. Women
Mm.
have been devalued, and they have been placed lower than man. And all of, you know, I mean, you see it from everything, on every sector. And so what we learned, like what we were teaching, and there's some discrepancies in the theory, but when we look through the lens of domestic violence theory and we look at women's violence and why women commit violence, what they call it a lot is called, when women commit violence against men, what we're seeing is called resistive violence. And so it's kind of the theory of when somebody is in Stockholm syndrome, when they're trauma bond to the abuser for a long time, okay? And it's so normalized. So there's a woman who's been living with an abusive man for a really long time. She was raised in an abusive environment. It was normalized. So in a lot of ways, she went into that thinking that that was normal.
Yep.
Okay. That's what love is. Okay. A lot of people associate love with abuse. I know that I did. Okay. Because I didn't know any better. Didn't know. And so she's in that relationship. Maybe he's hitting her, abusing her on all levels. And then one day, something wakes up within her. Something snaps, something changes. And maybe he's coming at her and he's about to hurt her. And this time she says no. And she picks up a lamp and she hits him over the head. You know how many women I've worked with who were jailed and persecuted for defending themselves?
It's just,
I mean, I had one woman who was literally who was being choked and he was going to kill her. And she she was finding a rock, smashed him in the head, and she got arrested.
yeah.
So what I see a lot of when women are reinforcing, you know, it is from this deep trauma, because when you stand up to any patriarch, whether it's a woman or a man, it's intense. And you have like the whole collective consciousness, the whole collective ego that's going to fight you. This is what I notice in my work. As a woman who's very fierce, who I've got a lot of fire, I can be really intense. I write really to the point. I write straight. People have a perception of me. They're like, oh, this girl's a bitch. She's so masculine. But when people meet me in real life, they go, oh, she's so sweet. She's so loving and kind. But they have this belief that a woman can't be powerful. She can't be truthful. She can't, you know, come in with a strong masculine or just a strong presence. And this is the distortion within the mind. And so many women are reinforcing that paradigm. They're reinforcing, stay silent, please everyone, be that good girl, you know?
Yeah.
So I think when we're looking at what it means to, let's say, evolve. Okay, we've used the word, you know, I've been saying the statement, I'm freeing my pussy from the patriarchy. Right? I'm freeing my sexuality from the patriarchy, from the patriarchal control systems. Because in Wilhelm Reich's theory is that sexuality is an indicator of a health of a society. The more unhealthy a society is, the more perverted and unhealthy the individual sexuality is. Absolutely true. Look at
How
this
true.
world.
Yeah.
And so the more that we can go to those roots of that base self, but that's that primal expression, and understand freeing our sexuality. I'm not talking about going and having sex with everybody, but reclaiming, which means deprogramming ourselves from the belief systems that are shame-based and controlling, dominating, exploiting, objectifying in nature. If it's
What's an
shame-based,
example of that? Like some of the thoughts that people have like that they can identify with, do you think? Like, it's funny how if you get into your head when you're going through this she is, if you're going through this, when times are getting tough, what are some of the thoughts that we have? What do we say to ourselves inside so that we can catch it and say something different? I found that very beneficial. But it usually is something we say to ourselves or we've heard being said to us from earlier on, and we believe it, you know, like you said before, you said that you associated love to abuse because, you know, the people who loved you the most abused you. And so what do we say to ourselves and why do we accept that, you know? Just to ask the question so that we bring it out of that subconscious darkness, you know, and have a look at it and examine it in our society today. These programs, you know, that are going on, and what are they? What are we saying to ourselves that we can intercept and say differently? I don't know if you can think of anything right now, but I've done this with a
Yeah,
lot of
that's a great
things.
question.
Yeah.
There's
And if you
so many
say something different.
examples.
Yeah, yeah, go ahead. What can you think
Um,
of?
all right. So I can think of a couple, and I'll give a couple. So one, especially, is speaking our truth. That's a big one. Okay, that's huge. So there's a lot of a thought will come. Let's say you have something to say, and it's really coming up, and it really wants to get on a paper, or it wants to be posted on social media, and you write it out. I know this happens to so many people, and then they look at it and they read it and they're like, oh, I don't know. Maybe this is a little too much. Maybe it's too
Mm-hmm.
much. Maybe it's too harsh. Maybe I'm going to piss somebody off. But it's burning. It's your truth,
Mm-hmm.
you know? Obviously, it's good to have discernment. Are you writing it from a place of anger, malice, or hatred?
Mm-hmm.
If you are, maybe you want to sit with those feelings before you really put it out there. To be conscious of the energy that you're, putting out.
Yeah.
But if it's like, especially if it's your truth, maybe you're pointing out, something about how fracking is detrimental to the environment, and that we need to hold the people who are fracking accountable. Okay. And it's really passionate, it's really fiery.
Mm-hmm.
A thought will come up, and a lot of the times they'll be like, no, that's too much. You have to be good. You have to not stir the pot. Um, you're going to be putting out negativity.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a big one. It's a big one. It's like there's this misnomer that if we start talking about quote unquote negative things, that we're just spreading negativity in the world.
Yeah, that's very
And
rife right now.
yeah, and there's a balance to it. But
Mm-hmm.
again, like I feel that the intention behind the words is the most important. The intention, what's your intention here? If I'm going to be talking about um, child trafficking, and I'm fired up and I got some anger in me, you know, what's the intention? What's the energy behind my words? I think that's a good way to check in.
Mm-hmm.
Other things that come along, especially like related to sexuality, is if we are, it's almost giving ourselves permission to feel, to allow ourselves to feel whatever is arising. That's a big thing with the patriarchy, is like, and I see this so much, and like you see how it's been infiltrated in the new age communities and self-help and some things. It's like it's not okay to feel. If you're feeling sad, then there's something wrong with you. You're not doing something right.
Mm.
And I do
Mm.
think that's directly related to our sexuality. And so rather than trying to shove down and keep controlling, what we just simply do is just we allow it to arise, allow everything to be as it is. There's so many examples. I'll try to see if I can think of something more specific. It's
Well,
usually,
just to take up on a point that you mentioned just now, you said that it's associated to our sexuality, that feeling of like we're wrong, and how do you take it back to that? How do you see the sexuality connected to that?
from the time we're born, our sexual development begins. And I feel that our sexuality is involved in every single aspect of our life. Our sexuality is reflective of how we feel about ourselves and our self-image and the way that we carry ourselves, the way that we approach life. I think that this is why patriarchal systems of control, um, totalitarian fascist regimes of governments have used abuse and violence related to sexuality as a control tool. You start to abuse, rape, molest children, especially, you start to shame children. What you're basically doing is you're creating one, trauma, you're destroying their sense of autonomy and self, and then you create this armoring that happens in the body in a very somatic level. And when you do that, the armoring, what like Wilhelm Reich says, is that you create a neurotic individual. And this is where we can see the greatest pathologies. Is it any coincidence that 1 out of 2 women, if not, it's like almost 1 out of 2 women have gone through some sexual violence in their life? Sexual violence is probably one of our greatest, most challenging issues on this planet.
Yes,
It
yes.
is, and it is absolutely tied to patriarchal thought, mind control, absolutely tied to it.
Dominance.
Dominance, objectification, possession, ownership. And it's a cycle of violence. And so what I think humans have had, what the struggle is that we're still so traumatized. Like, I get it. We want to put the pedophiles away in jail and kill them and castrate them. That's not going to stop anything.
No.
Not going to change anything, everybody.
And it's done from
And
vengeance.
it's this the criminal justice system that I worked with them. I used to work doing restorative justice work. I worked at a restorative justice center, and I'd work with individuals who are coming out of incarceration in a program called COSA, Circles of Support and Accountability. It was phenomenal. And what we were seeking to do was help these individuals rehabilitate and reintegrate into the community to learn. And so the criminal justice system in and of itself is patriarchal based. It is punishment based.
Yes.
Like, people, when I talk about this, they think I'm crazy. They're like, oh, so we're just going to let these abusive people just get away with anything. No, there's accountability. Look, if I make a choice and I hurt somebody, I'm accountable. I got to make amends. I got to change my ways. I got to learn from it.
Yeah.
But that's not happening. And so the cycle just keeps continuing and continuing. That's the work that I was doing with men who were, perpetuating abuse. My goal was to rehabilitate, to teach them, to bring them out of that normalization of violence and abuse and say, hey, have you ever thought about it this way? The only way that I could help these guys was by creating space for them to tell their story of abuse, to connect back into their emotional center, to feel again. And for somebody to mirror empathy and compassionate witness rather than judgment and blame, which is what they're used to. They go to prison, they get, yes, they made a really, 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 really crappy choice that was really harmful. But if we really want to look at changing and having a true, transformation within the system, we have to look away from shame, blame, punishment, and look at restoration. What are restorative models that we can adopt in every sector in our communities, in our life? We're looking at restorative,
right?
Looking at solutions based. We're looking at conflict resolution, rather than let's just keep repeating the same cycle over and over, re-traumatizing. Nothing's going to change. And if you study Wilhelm Reich and you understand his theory of bioenergetics, of how the energetic system works in the body, of how somatics works, the physiological processes that are occurring that create the holding patterns of trauma, that creates the armoring, and how that contributes to abuse, how it contributes to pathology and neurotic states, we would immediately shift our society. That's how we know, in a lot of ways, that I'm going to see if I can get a little bit better lighting. If that's how we know, in a lot of ways, that we're living under a regime of control, because the powers that be are very well aware of all of these things. They're not dumb.
Of course not. Yeah.
So they are dehumanized individuals. We call them psychopaths. A lot of them, maybe not all of them, but those who are in those really deep positions of power do seem to display very high levels of psychopathy. I mean, Wilhelm Reich, all his books were burned, and they jailed him because
when was he around? What era?
In the World War II era.
Okay.
Yeah. And he ended up dying in jail. They got rid of him pretty quickly.
Yeah.
And why he was such a major threat to the system, to the government, to the regime, to the Third Reich, was because when he wrote his book, The Sexual Revolution, that was a political book that was focused on how to shift the political and economic system, and thus our society. And
Mm-hmm.
he was saying that we need to shift and look at how sexuality is involved in the formation of society, and how the patriarchy uses sexuality and the control of thereof to dominate and oppress people.
It sounds like a fabulous book, Ashley. I would really want to read it. So, uh, it's called, what is it called again? The
The
Dynamic
Sexual Revolution.
the Sexual
It
Revolution.
is a great book. It's very dry.
Uh-huh.
It is a political book in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
So it is geared towards like political theory,
Mm-hmm.
economic, sociological theory.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're good with a little bit of that kind of dry, it's great. It's
Mm-hmm.
great. I mean, um, I've been studying him for many years, but over the past couple weeks, I've just been rereading his materials and reflecting upon everything that's happening right now. And like, we're all looking for solutions for societal transformation, and everybody has their opinions. And some of it is like, we have to fight against the pre-existing structure. That's never worked for me. I
No.
start to fight against the regime, they come back 10 times stronger, and I'm in my bed exhausted for weeks at a time, sick.
Right.
I start, if I lose my center, and it happens from time to time, sometimes we get something we're really passionate about and we're really triggered and we're angry and we lose our center.
Mm-hmm.
But it's hard to really create societal transformation if we're not in that place of empowerment. And I think it has to start from within, and it's definitely related to reclaiming our sexuality.
That's very interesting. Have you got any idea of how to do that? I mean, where do you start? Like it's so messed up, isn't it?
Yeah. I'm a huge advocate for somatic therapy, for
And
any
how's
type
that?
of body movement,
Mm-hmm.
anything that's going to help release trauma from the body and the
Mm-hmm.
armoring and the holding patterns. I'm a really big advocate. So, like, from my experience doing somatic work and as doing dance, and then trained in Vipassana meditation, they're all somatic in nature. When I start working directly with the body and the cellular consciousness, my mind shifts. So I go in and I start releasing trauma, and it's just like there's just these incredible shifts that occur, an increased expansion of awareness, of intelligence, of understanding, a deeper sense feeling of connection, interconnection, a deeper sense of inner safety and security, of confidence. Um, Specifically in terms of like when I've worked through my sexual trauma and really have seen how much I have felt so terrified of men, especially in intimate relationships, and working with that, and that how I would also show up in those wounds and be seeing through the lens of my wounds. Okay. The more that I've gotten in touch with my own sexuality, whether that is through actual self-pleasuring, whether it's through acknowledging my shame regarding my body. So what's my body image like? Where am I holding shame patterns? What's my relationship with my vagina? I once asked a friend a couple weeks ago, do you love your vagina? And she said, ew, no. I said, well, why not? But that's the indoctrination. We've cut off, we've been so disconnected from this center. Children are shamed so much. We live in a culture that on one hand is sexualized. Everything's sex, everything's
Mm-hmm.
beauty, everything's in your face. You can access porn at any time, anywhere. And at the same time, we get a completely different message that sexuality is dirty. It's dangerous because you might get an STD. It's risky because you might get pregnant. Make sure you don't have sex with too many people, or you're going to be a whore, or, you know, whatever. And
Yeah,
so
the other
we're getting,
word.
that is how you control a society. You're getting these very different mixed messages. What drives human beings? Before this pandemic, what is the most talked about subject on social media? What is it?
Are you trying to get me to say sex?
You know, it's not, I've never seen it directly about sex. I actually see
No,
very little conversations about sex,
that's what I was thinking, you know. I don't
which
see it either.
I've always found interesting, and I've liked to bring conversations on social media around sex to stir the pot a little bit and to see where people are at.
Mhm.
But it's about relationships,
Okay.
romantic, intimate relationships. And
Yes.
if you see, there's a billion-dollar industry all dedicated to matching couples. And it seems like
Mhm.
most people spend their lives looking for their one and going from
Yes.
relationship to relationship. So it's obvious that this is really important to human beings.
Yeah.
Sexuality, the ability to relate. Okay.
Yeah. That's an incredible insight, Ashley. I really value the insight that I see on your page all the time, you know, the things that you say. I've got something here that I want to read out that you wrote. And this is an interesting, everything that you say is interesting, an interesting take. You said, I'll read it quickly. Last month, while I was at my Vipassana meditation retreat, I observed something interesting. There was a man who sat near me who coughed violently the entire time. At certain points, we were given the option to meditate in the hall or within our own sleeping quarters. Some days, the cough was so audibly ineffective, I would notice my ego becoming very annoyed, wishing he would just go back to his room to meditate rather than stay in the meditation hall. One day, the cough just went on, and I was very distracted and telepathically would ask him to leave, which he didn't. So I left, returning to my room to meditate in silence. Nice lesson of empowerment. Leave if you don't like something, rather than bitch about it and wait for it to change. Anyways, after a couple of days at the retreat, the cough spread, and soon enough, many people joined him in the symphony of coughs. One day I noticed myself feeling unwell and possibly getting sick. I meditated through those sensations, transmuted, and nothing transpired. Reflecting back on this experience, I gather this was probably the virus spreading. I have had the experience before that when I was in early onset stages of sickness, if I stopped what I was doing, got very still, and meditated continually, I would prevent the symptoms from exploding. There is power in the art of observation, especially when one is habituated to meditation and has purified their mind to a certain level. As we observe the soma, we bring awareness to what is, and through this awareness, we bring forth vital energy that literally reorganizes the cellular consciousness. People underestimate and blow off meditation, with some people even citing it's some dumb new age experience practice. That's ridiculous and immature, and honestly a reflection of someone's terror of facing themselves. The power that emerges from us while we sit and watch and watch and watch is absolutely transformational. Try it someday, it will change your life. So what you're saying there is that people are frightened of being in their own space with their own mind and no input from everywhere, you know, because we have this distraction to get away from who we really are. We don't like what's in there, so we're always looking outside. And you found that I love what you said, though, because it happens in real life, not just in meditation, but in everyday life. People doing this. You thought that he had to move because he was coughing. Now, funny how that happens, how we think the other person has to do something that we want. That's how it's
Yep.
sort of not quite right.
I learned this also with romantic relationships. I'd have that tendency to be like pointing out and try to fix the other. And then one day it was just like, no, you know, what are you doing, Ash? You know, leave.
Yeah. Or put something else into the mix or something, but don't just wait for the other person to solve the problem when it's really your problem.
Exactly.
And I've noticed this, people doing this a lot. Some of the things that I hear a lot of even amongst the so-called enlightened, I don't know what kind of community you want to call, I guess, what we're in, there's an idea that if you say something that I don't like, you have to stop speaking, or you have to say it the way I want to hear it, or I don't want to listen to you. Have you noticed that syndrome much? It's maybe I should explain it more. If somebody says, well, that triggers me, so therefore you should stop talking, or you should say something that says it my way, that I can hear it better. People think that that the person who triggers the person is responsible for the triggering, but it's really the person who's being triggered that needs to sort of come to terms with managing what they hear.
Yeah, it's quite the responsibility to really own whatever is arising within us, to own it, but to also create a
Own
little
it.
bit of distance. And
I think we're having some difficulties with the transmission, Ashley.
okay, hold on one second. Give me a second. Let me just shut some stuff down here. How does that sound? Snaky, you want to offer your magic power? Oh no, I think it might be Denise's side. The snake is so cool. There
We
you
lost
go.
contact for a minute there. Yeah.
Okay.
I don't know what you caught of what I said, but basically how when people are triggered, they assume that it's the person who triggers them. It's the responsibility to say it in a way that they can hear it without their emotional self going into a complete frenzy. I see this a lot. Like, you don't, do you? Do you see this where people say, "Oh, you triggered me"? No, they don't say you triggered me, but I don't like the way you say that. That word isn't right, or that phrase, or they jump on something, and so they sort of say, "I'm not going to talk to you if you don't say it this way or that way." Or I find that that's a real downer for me when I'm talking to people, because I don't mean anything by saying what I do. Like you said before, sometimes it does come out a bit strong, because you've got all this justice that inside you, that you see the injustice of, and it just flares up, triggers up. I guess it really is. I guess what I'm talking about mostly is censorship. That's another thing that we see rife in our day. And how do we get to a place where we're free to speak, even though it's not the right words? I think that we've got to just make sure we don't do anything physical or damage anything outside of ourselves. But words are just something we should be able to say, and then somebody could say something back, not punish the person for saying the words.
Yeah, I agree. And I feel like what we're looking at is trauma reactions. You know,
Mm.
I think that, when people, I mean, it depends. I mean, some people are very narcissistic, and there's a lot of that on there, especially in social media. And the way that they come off is really not okay. And I think that from what I've gotten, I'm either at the point where I'm just gonna be like, recognize where they're at and just be like, no. And that's my boundary, because I don't operate in just like a 3D mentality. There's a lot of energy going on. And so I think it's really important for us to have strong boundaries, you say, especially as women, especially as strong women who have strong voices. Because there will be a lot of darts being thrown at you. I've had so many darts thrown at me because of things that I say. When I talk about certain things politically, and I got people be like, who the fuck do you think you are, Miss Know-It-All? And I'm like, nope, not talking with you. If you can't approach me on an equitable level and treat me with dignity and respect, you're not going to, unless you're coming to me as a client, no. With that said, however, is that I think that there is a real huge gap in people's ability to communicate peacefully. You know, there's, like I said, people are operating behind screens, and there's so much trauma reaction, there's so much ego projection, and there's a real lack of a personal accountability and responsibility and reflection. You know, it would be advantageous if we see something that somebody says, something writes, and before we immediately react, we sit with it, we sit with the sensations, and we reflect. Right
Yeah,
now, because of everything that's going
might take
on,
a while to get like that.
um, because of everything that's going on, I mean, people are in shock right now. You know, like this
Yeah,
is a traumatic moment for a lot of people, and so it's a very
yeah.
sensitive moment as well. And so you're going to see a heightened increase of reactions and conflict, I'm sure. And as I was saying today with a client, like conflict is such an amazing opportunity for growth and potential. And conflict is an invitation for us to go deeper into intimacy with each other, deeper into relation, deeper into understanding. So, for instance, yesterday, I had this guy make a comment telling me what he believed that I need to do or what I should be, and I told him to fuck off.
Mm-hmm.
I was pissed. I was angry. I was done. Um, and I was triggered, and I sat with myself all day and I said, you know, yeah, in a lot of ways, go fuck off. You know, like in a lot of ways, I want to tell the patriarchy, hey, go fuck off. Stop trying to
Mm-hmm.
control me as a woman.
Yeah,
But that's also not how I want to show up in life, you know? And I really felt that. I felt the pain of even though he was being narcissistic and he was gaslighting, I felt the pain of reacting and talking to him like that. Because what I say to others, I do to myself. And I was just like, no, like this isn't who I am. So I messaged him and, you know, I said, I'm sorry. I'm sorry that I told you that. I said, I was really triggered and I was having a really hard day. My mom's in the hospital and I've just felt really sensitive and I just, you know, those are my boundaries. Like, please. If
yeah. I think that's awesome that you did that, Ashley, because when we do something wrong to each other, we often feel that we shouldn't make another face-to-face contact, or we keep away. That's what I've found in my life now. I'm a lot older than you. It might be different in my generation, but that's what everybody seems to do.
they ignore it,
They sever. Pardon? What
they
did you
avoid
say?
and ignore.
Right.
Yeah,
And
I can't
that
do
just,
that.
it doesn't help. It can't help. So you had the you know the the self self fortitude to write to him and reconnect with him. So we can always, like, people hang up, on you, and if they do that, I don't like it, but if they do it, if they came back and said, look, I'm sorry, I just got to a point where I was, and when we do we go beyond those limits of ourselves, we should keep the door open, instead of, then it often turns into another game. I'm not talking to you, and
No, it
then
was really
don't
beautiful.
talk to
Like,
me and all this.
I reached out and I said, you know, I was triggered, I was upset, I was hurt, I'm sorry. I should have said this. And he said, I'm so
Yeah.
sorry for the way that I talked to you, Ashley. It was really out of line and I understand. And I said, thank you. And I said, hey, if you're ever up for a call or video call and you want to go deeper into this and we can explore this. And he was like, sure, you know. So that's what I mean is, like, we're human, we make mistakes. I make mistakes. I teach this for a living. I mean, I teach about healthy communication, nonviolence. I'm a counselor, but I have my moments.
Mm-hmm.
And I felt so much shame and guilt last night. And I had to hold myself in such tender compassion and be like, Ash, honey, like, look at all the work that you're doing and all the love. And yeah, that part of you felt like, hey, why can't you see me? Like, why am I not good enough? You know? And so I held compassion. I understood where that come from a lifelong of just people constantly saying, when you're trying your best, you're not doing it right. But it also is hitting on my wounds, the patriarchal wounds of I'm stepping more into my power. I'm using my voice more. It's fierce as fuck.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a lot of people who are threatened by that. And they're telling me that I'm not sensual or girly enough. Because that's basically what this guy said to me, was I'm not sensual enough or girly or feminine enough, right? But that was a potent opportunity when I could admit and say, because a lot of people said, Ashley, it was warranted that you said fuck off to this guy. There's times you have to tell people to fuck off. It's true, but it's not how I want to live my life. And,
No.
you know, I reacted. I lost my center. But the opportunity to reach out in that vulnerability and say, I'm sorry. And then him say, I'm sorry too. And was just like, wow, this is it. This is how we can work and heal together, and we can forgive. Now, not all people are going to be like that. There's going to be a lot of people out there who would have responded and been like, you're a fucking bitch. And they're narcissistic and they're mean and they're abusive. This guy, I thought maybe he doesn't even, English isn't his first language. Maybe he wasn't even able to communicate and articulate. I should have said, hey, that hurts when you say that. Can you please explain what you mean by that? I felt so awful. But it is what it is. We learn, we grow, we forgive, we have compassion for ourselves and others. And I think that, like, if anything, you asked me at the beginning, like, what am I doing? My whole life is devoted to compassion, is to understanding compassion-based systems. Like, I have visions and dreams of creating greater restorative models that are based in compassion, that can be implemented in prisons, in schools, in other systems, that will just change the entire frequency, the entire environment, shifting, evolving away from control-based systems, shame-based systems, and moving into compassion-based systems. Because compassion holds everything. It holds the mistakes. It holds the humanity. It holds it all. And when we can come from compassion, we can really find solutions.
Oh, that is so incredible. Ashley, because I think we've covered a heck of a lot today, and we've had a wonderful special guest as well, Tartaria, and that was unexpected.
She's so lovely, isn't she? So precious. She's loved it. She's like, she's blissed out right now.
So good. Oh, how cute. How fantastic. I think we'll leave it here for this time, and we'll probably talk again about some of these things. I think what you're doing for everybody in what you say is resonating with a lot of people, and I have nothing but the highest regard for you, and I love to hear your videos and read the stuff that you write, and I encourage you and support you. So I wish you lots of impetus in what we're going to go through. Do you think it's going to get a little bit heavier before it gets better?
It is. Yeah. But we got this.
Yeah.
We got this.
We've got this. We've got this. This is actually, in some ways, a bit of a gift, because it leaves us nothing to go back to that's good. You know, like everything has been slashed and burned. The environment is, we just treated nature like, you know, like a trash can. And so we can do better than this. And we'll do it. And we're going to do it. And we're doing it.
I want to say one.
Thanks so much,
can I
Ashley.
say one thing real quick?
Of course. Yes, of course.
It's a little political. It's a little politically, you know, disruptive. But I've been observing so many people attaching to this hope around QAnon and Trump and all of this. And I talked to a friend last night who called. I've been getting a lot of heat about my criticism and my suspect of the QAnon movement. And he said, Ashley, they're just trying to protect the Constitution. And I said, the Constitution needs to be rewritten. I said, that's outdated. That was written by men. And it has nothing, including nature, Pachamama, Gaia, the earth, protection. I said that Constitution needs to be rewritten. So yeah, I agree. Like whatever's going on, I am not for going back to the old ways of a patriarchal male-dominated society that continues to exploit not only all human beings, but this precious, precious, beautiful planet. So I
I'm
pray that,
right with you, woman.
yeah. All
Yeah,
right.
good for mentioning that, because it is taking people's minds again into another program. And this is what I think about. This is what I think about anybody who does not stand in their name, who does not give their name. They're cowards. Like, why don't they come out and say who they are? Like, what's the problem with them? Like, are they scared of, like, they might get killed? So what? We might all get killed. Now's the time to stand in our name, if there ever was a time. And if QAnon, is legit, let's hear who they are, or who he is or she is. Because, and I think people need to. That's what it means by being accountable. Ask those questions. Thanks a lot,
It,
Ashley.
yeah, we don't need games. We need transparency. All right, Denise, I love
We
you.
definitely do. Mwah. To you and Tartaria.
Thank you. Bye, sweetie.
Catch you again soon, my dear. Bye-bye.
Be well.